You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. My guest today is Jessica Gershman. Jess is the voice behind the Zen-ish Mommy podcast, as well as a passionate believer in the power of self-care. Through her work as a certified yoga instructor, an accomplished home chef, and a dedicated mindfulness practitioner, she creates a place where moms can slow down, be authentic, and take the me time without guilt. Today, we talk about how becoming a mom really pushed Jess to heal from her past, including sexual trauma and disordered eating. She shares how stress and postpartum health issues caused her to take a pause and focus on her own needs and what it actually means to be a Zen-ish mommy. Jess is passionate about reframing motherhood and breaking generational cycles around nutrition, sexuality, and prioritizing women's care. So before we get into this conversation with Jess, I have to tell you about this amazing service that our friend Tara Clark has going on. Tara, who you all know and love from the super popular Instagram account Modern Mom Probs, and from episode 3 of this podcast, launched Modern Mom Style Box. Modern Mom Style Box is a rental service that makes it easy to wear new clothes all month long without any stress or commitment. From seasonal staples to statement pieces, rent unlimited looks for just one flat fee of $60 a month. Yeah. It's really amazing and it's so easy to use. You just browse through all the amazing clothes on the site, add all the things that you like to your virtual closet, and once you do that, you'll be mailed 3 items at a time to wear as often as you'd like. When you're ready for something new, send the items back or buy your favorites at an exclusive discount and get ready for your next box. It's just so effortless. You can switch up your look all month long with an unlimited rotation of styles delivered right to your door. I am a Modern Mom Style Box client, and I can attest that it is as easy and wonderful as it sounds. So, please go check it out. The link and details are in the show notes. And now, here's Jess. Hey, Jess. Thank you so much for being here. So good to see you.
Good to see you, Christy. I'm so excited to be here and be on the other side of the mic.
I know, it's nice. I'm excited to dive into your story a little bit. That being said, I've heard now from listening to your show that your mission is about reframing the idea of what a good mom looks like. And I want to know from you, what did you think it was? And then how did you reframe it and what does it look like for you now?
Yeah, I think a lot of moms walk around feeling not good enough. You know, we've all been mom shamed or have seen a friend be mom shamed at some point or another. And, you know, with Pinterest and social media, it really seems like everybody else has everything put together, that everyone's doing the Pinterest birthdays and is participating in the PTA and volunteering in their kids' school. And their life looks all buttoned up in this pretty package. And you're the only one that is struggling. And the reality is you are a good mom. You already are one just by showing up, right? Mm-hmm. And we try to show up as moms and do the best that we can each and every day based on what we have, what resources we have. Did we sleep last night? Did we nourish our body? Were we able to move? Where's our anxiety? What's going on in our life as a human being, as a woman? And how can we show up? And it looks different every day. And so for me, I saw so many women in my yoga studio that were just so stressed out and so exhausted and so feeling less than. And I just wanted to create a platform and a space to tell other women, hey, this is hard, but we're in it together and you're all okay.
Mhm, mhm. Was it something that when you saw women in your studio struggling, did you see yourself in them, or you thought, "You know what? I've gotten to a good place with this and now I can help you." Like, where was the shift for you?
I think it's both. And I think you're never like totally out of the woods. I think I
Mhm,
had done a lot of work through my yoga, through therapy, through some deep trauma work that I had done, and felt okay. I mean, there's always more to be done,
mhm,
but I knew that it didn't have to be that despair, that feeling of worthlessness, that I had really worked on my own self-worth. And I remember the first yoga class that I found myself in, and for the first time in my adult life, and I was 29, I finally felt like okay in my skin.
mhm.
And that feeling was amazing, but I didn't have that all the time. I didn't know what that was like. I do know through my teachings, through my trainings, through my own personal work, that there is a different way. There is a way to be able to be okay with yourself.
Mhm, mhm. And, you know, prior to doing, quote unquote, the work, as a lot of us say, right? Like that personal development work, the therapy, yoga, all of that. Was there a particular catalyst for, okay, it's time to do this work?
Oh yeah. Having a baby girl.
Having a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Being a
yeah,
mom,
yeah.
not being able to just like let all of my dirty laundry just kind of slide and not address it, because work, I mean, doing the work is hard. Personal
Yeah,
development is hard. Growth is hard. Um, but it was go time. And
yeah.
mostly because I knew I had to lead by example, and I
Mm,
didn't want my daughter to suffer from what I went through. I didn't want her to have disordered eating and eating disorders and anxiety and body dysmorphia and a lot of the things that I really struggled with, lack of self-worth, all those things. So I had to be able to model those qualities, and you can't really fake that. Your
right.
kids will call you out on it.
Right.
They'll call you on your stuff if you're not being truthful and honest.
They can smell it. It's
Yeah,
like,
man, they are the truth seekers.
yes, yes. Okay. All right. So, and I actually didn't note that in our notes, but now that you say it, I'm reminded of reading about it, about you, and hearing about it on your show. How old were you when you really sort of honed in on, wow, I have an eating disorder, or what was that path like?
Well, it's interesting. I think I had the like everything that could make up an eating disorder before actually having the behaviors. When I look
Mm,
back, my dad was super controlling and narcissistic, and I had two siblings that were overweight, and I was the thin one, so I was the golden child. It was all
mm,
of these things that kind of led me into. But it wasn't until I went to college. I went to Miami of Ohio, which at the time was like the eating disorder capital of colleges. I had no idea. I
wow.
mean, I really didn't know that going into it. And it was
Mhm,
actually like a third choice school. But then I got paired in, and I knew no one. And I got paired with two other young women, and one of them was just a raging anorexic.
mm,
And I tried to be anorexic at first, but I was still working out and into fitness, and I was like, that didn't work. And so, became a bulimic, and it
mm,
started this, probably 5-year relationship of just despair, just loneliness, sadness.
mm.
It's this really awful place where you think you're in control because you're controlling what goes in your body or out of your body, but you're just completely out of control.
Mm, mhm. What would you say to a mom listening who has concerns for their daughter or son, maybe starting to see signs, or see, I feel like most of my audience is going to have younger children, but maybe there's something even that you would say to the mom who has a daughter in high school or college and she's seeing it. How would you have started to talk to yourself about it?
Man, I am blessed. My best friend is an eating disorder therapist and
Wow.
specializes
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
treating eating disorders and also teaching other therapists because I don't necessarily know the answers and it's so scary. I
Mm.
remember when my oldest daughter was in kindergarten, the first time they called her fat.
Oh,
And I just got chills and it just
oh,
broke my
I did
heart,
too. Yeah.
and kids are mean. I mean, that's just the
Mm.
reality of kids and it's just the nature of growing up. And if it
Mm.
wasn't her weight, it was some, her hair or her last name or something, the kids find something to pick on other kids about. Uh, I really focus in our family. I never talk about dieting. I don't talk about, weight or calories or things being healthy. My best friend said, there are sometimes foods and every time food and all the time
Mm.
foods. And that's a really good way to reframe. Like we all enjoy cake. Cake is great. Do you want to eat it every day, all day? No, that's probably not going to make you feel very good.
Mm.
If someone or a parent out there listening maybe has seen changes in their child's behavior or changes in their eating patterns, talk to someone, reach out. There are specialists out there. And it's interesting with eating disorders because the way you say something,
Mhm.
and it can be so innocent. You really, really, really have good intentions and just these few little words, and it can fuel the fire, man. I remember when my dad said to me, "Oh, it looks like you did a good job on your dinner," which really meant you ate too much, right? And that was just like, boom, the catalyst for,
Mhm.
raging eating disorder behaviors. And so I would say definitely talk to someone.
Yeah. I really love that, the sometimes versus every time. I think I've
Because
not
then
heard that before.
it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be good or bad, right? Nothing's
Right.
bad. Cake
Right.
isn't bad. Cake is
Right.
great. I love
Right.
cake. It wouldn't feel good to eat cake 3 meals a day every day. You would feel pretty not good in your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. So you've also said that you went to culinary school for fun. And I know from following mostly your social media that you're very into cooking and recipes and all that. Is that feels to me now having knowing what I know, are you like, I don't that just you're like super healed. Like I don't know, just to be dealing with food on in an enjoying it and not it being this very controlled, regimented environment. Like, how did you get from A to Z on that?
It's interesting because with food versus like alcohol or drugs, right? You don't have to have a healthy relationship with drugs or alcohol, but you have to find some kind of peace with food. I also grew up, even though my dad was like super controlling, crazy, mealtime was a really big deal. And it was a time that
Mm.
and with my mom too, it was a time that we sat down and we broke bread and we talked about the day. And that was so important to me. We're Jewish and we practice the holiday of Shabbat, which is a weekly holiday on Fridays, and we do our blessings, and we don't do anything Friday nights, and we have movie nights, and there's so many wonderful things that happen around the table, like
Mm.
conversations you have with your best friends, like with your
Mhm.
spouse, with your kids. And I want my kids to love food, to celebrate food.
Mm.
My oldest daughter, I mean, her first meal was like a salmon piccata with a wild mushroom risotto, right? So she ate what I ate. Food is celebratory.
Yeah.
I do love it. And I love trying new recipes. And, it is also like a way to satisfy the craziness of thinking about food all the time. I was able to
Mm.
just channel that energy instead of being like, what am I eating? What am I not eating? To be like, okay, let's kind of channel that obsessive compulsive energy and put it in a more useful space. And so I can do it with recipe creating and meal planning and that
Love
kind of
it.
thing.
Yeah. And do your kids cook with you?
They do, they like it. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting. So any parents out there, my daughter, 9-year-old, she's been a picky eater but she has noticed, she said to me the other day, she's like, Mom, my palate has changed. I like zucchini now. I like Brussels sprouts. And we had someone over that cooked dinner for some friends of mine. And she's like, I liked all the food that he made. Mommy, my palate is so adult these days, so I keep nobody ever, you don't force your kids to eat everything on their plate, but you had to try it. So even if
Right.
it was the 150th time that you're trying zucchini, you got to try it. And it
Yeah.
does, our palates do change. They do
Yeah.
evolve. And so I never force fed my kids or made them eat their food on their plate, but definitely trying the food at our house was super important.
Yeah. Well, and I've read and heard in all the things everywhere that it can take kids even up to 20 times to just try a food and go, oh, and like recognize it,
Or 200 if it's Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Yeah. And it's funny that as you were talking, the only thing I could think of for myself was like, when my mom used to let me like try wine or whatever in high school, and I was disgusted by it. And now I'm like, where's the wine? Like my palate definitely changed.
Yeah, a little different, but on the same line for sure.
Yeah, the adult version of what we're talking about here. All right. So, okay. So how old are your daughters now?
13 and 9.
13 and 9. And then you have stepchildren.
I do. And I had someone tell me to call them bonus kids. I was like, ooh, I like that. That reframe. It sounds so much better than stepkids.
Yeah, it does. Okay. So wait, so so what has that been like? I mean, I feel like, so we have, my family, we have half siblings. Like, which is like super just like weird to say in general, but so I just call them my brother and sister, and then people are like, how is like your brother kind of the same age as your mom? Like, I don't know. Like, so talking about stepmotherhood, how old were the kids when that happened? How did that go? Did you have a role model? Like, I feel like that could be very overwhelming.
Yeah, step parenting is really, really challenging for sure.
Yeah.
So I also grew up in a family I had 2 half siblings. My dad had been married a couple times. My mom had been married a couple times. We are all over the place. I also had a really wonderful stepmother.
Okay.
My dad's wife. They've been together, oh my goodness, 35 years now. So she was there for most of my life. My parents got divorced when I was 4. She is now one of my best friends. I love her to death. She never talked bad about my mom. She was just a really good support for my dad because he was a lot to handle. And as much as you don't think you like perpetuate the cycle sometimes in families, I of course fell in love with a man who had 2 children, and at the time they were 3 and 1. So I was also 22 years old at the time that I took on a 3 and a 1-year-old. And I think at that time I was just like playing house because I was like, that's what you do when you're like in your early 20s and your frontal lobe isn't developed. You just don't make rational decisions. But it was challenging. Their mom didn't like me. So that set it up for not a really great relationship. And I tried really, really hard with them at the beginning. And it would be like, well, you're not my mom kind of thing. And, just got defeated. When my daughters were born, and my youngest stepson would say that it was the worst day of his life. He wouldn't say that now at 19, but growing up, the worst day of my life is when Eva was born. I was like, oh, okay, we love you too. But it definitely made sense. Being a parent to the girls and going through, you can't go back. I can't go back, but it would have given me so much more tolerance. Like I didn't understand the things that the boys were going through, and I would get frustrated, and I was young and I didn't have my own children. And then I see as I raise my girls, and I was like, oh wait, they're just kids. Like that's normal.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that I did a stellar job at being a step parent, but I don't know that I did. I know the boys know that I love them, and I showed up for them in a way of, they were always organized. They knew what camp they were getting into. I support them in, finding their colleges. I really negotiated with the whole family to send my youngest stepson to boarding school, which was kind of like a really hard decision. But it has changed his life, and he's just got a $26,000 scholarship to go to SCAD. Wow. So it did work out. It did work out. But I guess in wrapping all of that up, being a step parent is hard. You do a lot of the work. We were 50-50 custody, a lot of the work with not a little bit of the reward.
Yeah. Where is the relationship with them now?
It's good. So 21 and 19 are the boys. It's really been interesting to see their sisters relationship develop with them and how that will continue to grow. I mean, they are boys, so there's
Different.
a little, but I know that they're going to be great friends. The boys and I talk on the phone. I'm super proud of them. We see them when they're out east, both of them, when they come home and celebrate in that way, and, check in with them on the things that, mom would check in, and how are your grades and how's your girlfriend and, how is life?
Are you eating?
Are you eating? Right. I love it. I'm good in a crisis. My oldest stepson had some health things. And so, he just sent me a text. Thank you so much for getting me into this doctor. It's like, I'm good in a crisis mode. I can handle that. And their mom and I get along great now, and, time heals a lot of things. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Cause I kind of had it on the brain. I'm sure you know of her, but I was listening to Michelle Dempsey's podcast, and I was just saying that, like, she's the mom's moving on divorce specialist, and she's also now a stepmom. And I just always find it so interesting to listen to her, because I'm not divorced. I'm not looking to be divorced in any of that, but I feel like going through that experience, a person learns so much about themselves, not just divorce, but in becoming a stepmom, and just having the idea of a really blended family. You learn so much about yourself, you learn so much about your partner, and you got a real taste of parenthood before you were probably ready for it. And yeah, so I appreciate you sharing. I feel like the more we can talk about modern families and blended families, the less taboo and stuff, because I still feel like there are stigmas and sort of these like walls around that. Would you agree? Do you feel that?
yeah. And I think the more that we can share our real honest experience, because it's not all great. I lived through my husband's divorce, which gave me a very inside perspective on divorce, and saw as an adult what it did to the kids. Remember my own feelings when my parents got divorced, and I'm like, man, and they were similar ages of my brother and myself.
Yeah.
And it really gave me a perspective of like, man, I don't want to do that to my girls, and like, it all turned out okay in the end, and things happen for a reason. But the more that we can talk about our real human experiences, and give space for everybody to show up, step parent, mom, adopted parent, all people, all women, and just have the experience.
Yeah. All right. So in thinking about real experiences and sharing, I've heard you talk about after the birth of your first daughter, your oldest daughter, you went through some pretty traumatic health scares, experiences. Like, can you talk about that a little bit, and what that was like and what happened?
Yeah, I think coming to find out, for the last 20 years, I've kind of had some gray area diagnoses of like chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, and really being on the backside of that, really realized that it was stress. And even though I don't necessarily feel stressed every day, my body was under stress. I wasn't taking care of myself in the way that I should have. I got a lot of chronic illness for a pretty extended period of time. And it really just put me in a deficit. I was depressed. I was sick all the time. I was constantly on and off antibiotics, which just wreaks havoc on your system. And your health, I really had to sit back and look at what I was doing to contribute to my health, or the lack of health, really. And had to get honest about my stress, about running at full pace. I said, I realized I was really an anxious person, that I just covered up with being put together and having everything organized and controlling everything. And I have to micromanage all the situations, and the meals are always fine and everything's put together. And on the outside, someone would be like, oh, Jess is good. She's got it together. On the inside, I was just flailing. And doing everything I could to kind of manage my own stress and anxiety. And so I really started to prioritize rest, taking like days off. I've just really
revolutionary. I mean, like, whoa.
Which is just shocking, but like actually really taking days off and finding interest in things that weren't physical and physically exhausting. Reading a book, going for quiet walks, like sitting down and playing with my kids. I mean, I was always too high strung and intense to do any of that. and slowly but surely, and found an amazing functional medicine doctor that actually listened to me. Because
That's on my list.
I've got a great name. But people that, a lot of Western medicine physicians discredit women, because on the surface you may look healthy, or maybe we discredit ourselves and be like, oh, it's just mom brain, or that's just the way it is. And really there's could be a lot of underlying things. So I found a really good provider that helped me.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, especially when we as women are in the years where we are maybe on and off again, pregnant, postpartum. I mean, the amount of times I hear someone say, yeah, I went to a doctor's appointment, and they're like, well, you just had a baby. So.
Right. Quit normalizing that. No.
Yeah.
We need follow-up support. Years postpartum, we may be off. Hormones. I mean, my thyroid just totally went kaput. All my hair fell out. And no one was looking at me being like, well, could be your thyroid. They're like, I don't know. This is normal. I'm like, no.
Wow. Okay. So you had hair, you just had a lot going on, and still, like, how long did it take for someone, or did you go, hey, is this my thyroid?
Yeah, no, I finally did. I made someone. So when someone generally pulls a thyroid panel, which is like, they look at TSH. So there's all these different components of thyroid, and I'm not a doctor, but there's one factor that a lot of people look at, and that could be in normal range. I mean, you really need someone that's going to do a little deeper dive, because normal range may not be normal for a person. And I'll never forget this. I was with an endocrinologist, and he had put me on a medication, and I wasn't feeling any better. In fact, I was feeling worse. I had gained 10 pounds in like 30 days.
Yeah.
And he literally looked at me and was like, well, you just need to go buy bigger clothes. And I was like, no, I'm telling you that nothing about my lifestyle has changed. This is not helping my thyroid. My thyroid is still not functioning. I know you're looking at this little factor and it's telling you that things are good, but I'm standing here as a patient telling you that I'm not good. Yeah. So I just had to keep searching. I had to keep searching for someone that was going to help me.
Yeah. It's exhausting. It's like the burden is on us,
100%.
But I feel like most of us in the US anyway, we grow up with this almost like blind loyalty, or just like blind trust of physicians. And then you get to a certain point, and I feel like for most of us, it comes around motherhood of going, what's going on here? Why is no one taking me seriously? Why do I have to be the one to connect the dots from all the specialists? Because there's no one sort of at the top looking at all the things the specialists are looking at. It's like each person just focuses on their own thing and doesn't really connect it to the other.
That's 100%. I mean, even if you look at, there's a minimum of 10 appointments when you're pregnant and 1 postpartum. Yeah, that's it. And then they're like, oh, you're cleared to have sex, have a nice life. Everything looks good. So we definitely, as women, and, as I wanted to do that on my podcast and bring in all of these specialists and educate women, because we have to be our own self advocates and we have to quit normalizing like this thing called mom brain. Like, that's not really a thing.
Yeah. I mean, my 6-week appointment with my second was over Zoom, like over FaceTime, because it was COVID. And like, I was like stressed going into it, feeling like, how are they going to check me out? Like, I don't know what's going to go on here. I'm really nervous.
Get naked for the Zoom, right?
I literally was so nervous. And it was just like, he held up the phone and he's like, how you doing? How you feeling? I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, as long as you feel good, keep going. And I'm like, oh my God, is this real life right now? Yeah. I just had a baby. Anyway.
But it's true. I mean, it's sad. I mean, I talk about this all the time as specialists, and we just have to educate ourselves. We really just have to trust our intuition, which we're told not to trust. So, I mean, everything in society, everything in the news is like, you don't know anything about your own body, and trust that really you are your own best advocate, and listen to what your body's telling you and find someone that will listen.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned, bringing experts and whatnot onto your show. And did the podcast come from that time that you mentioned in your yoga studio of just seeing women struggle?
Yeah. So the podcast at first was called Mom Slow Down. And I really wanted to bring on experts and educators and educate women on everything, relationships, friendships, parenting,
Mm-hmm.
trauma work, healing, functional medicine, plant medicine. And I'm rebranding it. I'm super excited to the Zen-ish Mommy podcast because I really look at myself and I was branded myself as the Zen Mommy, but I'm like the Zen-ish Mommy. I think I try really hard to
Mm-hmm.
be on my journey and be Zen, and I fail. I'm human. I yell at my kids.
Mm-hmm.
I do all the things. And I think that we're all both. It's a both and. We're Zen and crazy. We're authentic and insecure. We
Mm-hmm.
can show up and have it put together and still be flailing like it, and it's all okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's reminding me of I spoke with Caitlin Soule. She's a little less of a hot mess mom. And I said to her, I'm like, and it's reminding me because I'm looking at you. You look gorgeous right now. And I'm like, I want to be that mom that like always looks put together and shows up at pickup with the cute outfit and the sneakers. And I'm like, sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. She's like, you're both. Sometimes you show up like a hot mess and sometimes you show up put together. And I'm like, I'm sitting here looking at you. I'm like, yeah, today I showed up to this interview like a hot mess. And other times I'll show up with my hair.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I had two podcasts before this, which is the only reason why I'm showered with hair. Otherwise, I'd be in a top knot and a pair of leggings for sure. Right.
Yeah.
We are both though. I mean,
Yeah.
we have the ability to be both.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? And I appreciate the rebrand. I appreciate where you're coming from. The Mom Slow Down though did, initially draw my attention because I feel like the more moms, the more therapists, the more coaches I talk to, it always comes down to slowing down. We can't know what we want to work on for ourselves. We can't know what we want. We can't know what we don't want. Nothing if we're just on the go all the time. What does slowing down mean to you? How do you do it? Go.
Absolutely. I mean, even when I talked about prioritizing rest and how I really had to take ownership for what I was doing to contribute to my own downfall, I had to slow down to get there. And I'm with you. Everyone I talk to, every therapist, every educator, every specialist and expert talks about really listening
Yes.
to ourselves.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen without slowing down. Moms, just as a culture, manage everything. Not only do we manage our own life and our ownness as a human being, as a woman, we manage everyone else's schedule and calendars and life and emotional feelings and well-being. And we're the receiver of everyone's anxiety, and we hold space for everyone in our family. And we do it because we can, because women are multitaskers, because, we can take on more. And ultimately, we spend enough time taking on everybody else's energy that we don't have any time or space or energy to deal with home, to deal with ourselves. And slowing down, if that was like one piece of advice to any mom, and it's so funny, it'd be like, well, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's like, it's reframing. It's just having to sit for a minute, feels what comes up. When I talk about, trusting your intuition in your own body, getting to that intuition only happens if you slow down. And you don't have to be a meditator, and you don't have to be a yoga practitioner. I mean, slowing down can be reading a book, taking a bath, just relax and taking a nap. When's the last time you like took an actual nap and like really let yourself take a nap, not just like fell asleep in the middle of the day out of sheer exhaustion, right? Because you've been up all night with babies and whatever the case may be. But really, to walk in nature, I mean, it can look like so many different things. It can be done even with a friend. Like slowing down is just a way of life, a way of being. And we've gotten really good as a society of just going faster, and we're constantly attached to our phones and technology. And it's just about becoming more present and more mindful. And it doesn't mean that you never get on TikTok and get lost in all the funniness, but just be mindful when you're doing it, right? If you're aware and
enjoy it if you're doing it. Yeah.
And then let it be enjoyable. Like, man, I just got lost in TikTok for 30 minutes. Haha, that was great.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to come with shame and guilt or some story about you as a person. It could be like, wow, I just spent 30 minutes on TikTok. That was really funny.
Yeah.
Got my laugh for the day.
Yeah. It's so true, because we're going to do those things anyway. So if we're shaming ourselves through them or feeling guilt through them, then we're taking away the pleasure from the experience. But I'm glad you mentioned even, being like addicted to our phones and this and that, because all I was thinking as you were talking prior to that is unplugging, right? Like we just stop, unplug from other people's lives, because that's really what we do on the phones is we check in on what other people are doing, whether it's emails, who is emailing me, social media, who's doing what, so yeah. And I feel like it's so hard to do that.
And what it comes with too, a lot of the times, is some story about ourselves, whether we're good or bad. That's what happens when we get an email or don't. When we look at social media, right?
I'm not working hard enough, or I'm not
working hard enough. No one likes me. I'm not successful. I could be doing better. Oh, you suck. It's usually the story in our head. And the piece that I've gleaned the most in my mindfulness practice and kind of going down all of these various avenues is the awareness when my mind starts to get a hold of me, when my mind kicks up and says, hey, Jess, you suck. You shouldn't even be doing this. Everyone's laughing at you, or whatever it is for that day, or you're a terrible mother, or you're not a good enough friend, or whatever the story is for that day. I could be like, okay, mind, thoughts. I'm going to sit with that for a little bit, see how I feel about it. No, I'm not believing that today. I'm not going to attach onto that story. No, I don't suck as a person. No, I'm not a terrible human. And I can disconnect from those stories, those narratives in my head. And that's the skill I didn't have when I had my eating disorder and when I was really suffering, because I was just all in my head. That was 100%. And it is scary in there.
Yeah.
You do not want to be in there all the time. It is a scary place. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. So was it, getting to that first yoga class that started to show you how to do that, to disconnect and to really tune inward, and, the mindfulness? Where did mindfulness come from for you?
That yoga class showed me it was possible to feel okay in my skin, even just for 2 minutes, 30 seconds, which was an experience that I had never felt before, ever. I always felt really uncomfortable in my body. And it showed me that, okay, if that can happen once, that can happen again. And that started my 13-year love affair with yoga. That led me really, yoga is not a religion, but it led me to study past yogic texts and find a connection to God, to something greater than myself that I hadn't found. I didn't grow up with religion, and I converted to Judaism. And what I got out of that was really like, just be a good person, which was great, but I didn't feel some deep connection to God through Judaism. So that was really beneficial. And it got me to a place where I felt fortunate enough to really start to work on some of my trauma that I hadn't dealt with. And I talked very openly, and it wasn't until I was 35 that I was able to admit that my first sexual experience was rape, and really say that and own that, and have compassion for myself, and really start to unravel all the stories that told, about my sexual self and my sexual identity that I had been carrying around. And so I really think that set the pace, and then it just compounded, then I get to really understand what mindfulness is, and put that in application in my relationship, and create an extended orgasm practice with my husband, and study these things that really can take place when you're in your body, when you're really present. I know what it's like to be really present with my kids. I also know what it's like to not be present with my kids and be like not listening and scrolling through my phone and checking my email and doing all my stuff. But I do know the difference of being present, being mindful, being disconnected from my monkey mind, being in my heart and in my body, and also what it's not like.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, oh my God, I can't even imagine being in that position of 35, kind of just go deep diving into your trauma, and having that, I don't know, would you call it a realization, or how did that go?
Yeah. It's really kind of a cool thing. I felt very grateful that I was in a fortunate place in my everyday life to start to
Mm,
address some of my trauma.
mhm,
I went in knowing that I had trauma to work on, not necessarily knowing that that's what I was going to work on. I had
mhm,
always just considered it this thing that happened and it wasn't great.
mm,
But in talking with my trusted therapist in a safe space and talking that out, I did EMDR work.
mm,
I don't know if you're familiar with that.
mhm.
And loud, and I was like, oh wow, wait, like went back to that time at being 15 and being there and
Oh,
it's very
yeah,
visual and being like, oh yeah. I mean, we weren't really talking about that
right.
35 years ago or 25. I don't know how old am I? 25 years ago,
I'm
I guess.
like, yeah, 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 yeah. However old.
And so we've become more vocal as women about our
Yes.
own rights and our own bodies and what was acceptable and just kind of pushed off and not really talked about 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. We are talking about now. We are giving space to for women to say no, to have boundaries, especially in sexual relationships, and that just wasn't talked about then.
Mhm, mhm. EMDR is the one with that's the rapid eye where
It's like
the
eye
taps or the
movement.
movement. Yeah, eye
Yeah,
movement.
desensitization, rapidization, or
Yes,
something like that.
yes,
Yes.
yes, something like that.
It
Yeah,
literally, again, rewires your brain. Like
yes.
I was, so connected to my body. I felt energy releasing like from my brain. I felt these patterns get rewiring. And so the concept with that work is you come in with some kind of negative core belief,
Mhm,
right? And mine was that I wasn't worthy of love.
mm,
And that comes from our childhood trauma, the things that happen, these little traumas that we carry and collect along the way. That sexual experience was a part of that, and was able to reframe that. And so when I come out of that experience or come out of that trauma work, I'm like, oh yeah, no, wait, I am worthy of love. I do
mhm,
matter. And I felt such compassion for 15-year-old Jess that I'd never, not shame, not embarrassment, not whatever I had carried for most of my adult life, but compassion
mm.
and just love and sadness and grief for that
Yeah,
person.
yeah. Have you thought about how or if you will share that with your kids?
Ooh, yeah, I probably will. We are set to have a conversation. My daughter's oldest one is going into 8th grade.
Mhm,
And we've had puberty conversations, sex conversations. I did the conversations with my stepsons. Um, I will share that with them. I will
mhm,
share it in probably different capacities.
mhm,
She and I are due for a conversation this summer about drugs and alcohol,
mhm,
and putting yourself in situations and talking about. I mean, unfortunately, with drugs and alcohol and kids, with fentanyl and everything, there's no like experimentation. I mean, it's really life or death. And talking about sex
mm,
and talking about it in a way that no one talked to me about how amazing your body is and
yeah,
how talking about what sex can be like between two loving adults, between two consensual adults, that this is an incredible experience and what it's like to be a woman. And I probably very soon will get my daughter a vibrator, as
mhm,
because
mhm,
how are you going to teach someone what you like and really lean into female pleasure being a really good thing, which
mhm,
no one told me about when I was a kid.
mhm. I think it's still pretty rare,
Right.
truthfully, because we're all products of our upbringing. I wasn't talked to about that, and so it's not it wouldn't occur to me, to talk about it that way. It will, because I'm having conversations like this and conversations with sex therapists and, child psychologists and all the things who we want to change and break these cycles. And um yeah, I think that that's amazing. It really sounds like you're doing what you can to remove the shame from sex.
Yeah, I want her to feel so good in her body, know exactly what she wants, and
Mhm,
feel confident enough to, when she does have sex someday, to be able to ask for what she wants and feel pleasure in her body. I mean, I grew up feeling so much shame about
yeah.
sex. I remember just even telling my mom when the first time I had sex, she just cried for days, like never talked to me about it, just cried for days. I'm like, the hell is this? But yeah, we have that ability as the new generation, as the next generation, to change the framework. We just have to educate ourselves.
Yeah. I made a note when you were talking about your daughter, you saying we're due for a conversation. Is that something that you say to her, hey, we're due for this conversation, expect it, or you just in your mind have that mental note of what's coming? Like, how does that, it was an interesting way to phrase it.
I have told her, I was like, hey, in a really exciting way, I was like, we're going to have 2 awesome conversations. I set this up generally, like when they were younger, had books. But she knows we're going to have a conversation about sex. We're going to take that next step. You know, I said, and we're going to have a conversation, you know, about drugs. And I frame it really positively as like, because you're growing up and, you know, it's about giving you more freedoms. And I want you to understand the world. And unfortunately, the world's not all great, but as more that you're exposed and feel comfortable, that you've had some knowledge. So she knows it's coming. For me, I'm like, it'll give me, I like to just, because when you have multiple kids and it's not one of those conversations that you just like throw in somewhere. It's a very important conversation. And I want to make it special. Like when I talk to her about it, like maybe we go do an overnight and do a mom-daughter thing. I want it to be special because I want her to just know how special her body is. That's gonna make me cry because I never did. And I think we teach our daughters how incredible their bodies are and how worthy they are as people. And we show that to them, then they feel that.
I was going to say, when you said that you maybe do an overnight or something, I was going to ask you, you know, how you really set that scene. My mom used to take me for long car rides, you know, just, we don't have to look at each other, but you can't go anywhere. You know, we can both be staring straight, but you're stuck. So I like that. I like making it a special kind of mom-daughter moment. And it, you know, I'm curious if you don't mind sharing, where does your husband sit with this? Is he like, sure, get her a vibrator? Or is this like, oh my God, what are you doing to my daughter?
Well, we have been together 18 years, so he knows all of my mess, and he has been along for the ride of all of my ups and downs and crazy. You know, I come in and, you know, one day we're vegan, the next day we're keto, and, you know, we're all the things, and we're doing this therapy, and we're going on this retreat. So I think he's pretty used to that. When I tell him, and he knows about my trauma and my sexual trauma and how hard it has been for me to normalize pleasure as an adult woman. And he's been alongside me in that journey when I talk about how important it is that our daughters feel pleasure in their body and understand their bodies and celebrate their bodies and explore their bodies in a loving and beautiful, safe way. He's on board. He doesn't probably want to be in the room when I have that conversation, but you know, he was good. He happened to be the one when my daughter got her period. He was the one that was around. I was teaching yoga and he knew that it was a big moment and he knew that it was supposed to be really exciting and make a big deal about it. And it's a celebration. And, you know, I had, of course, like all these gifts and this, you know, we went out and we celebrated dinner and, you know, we did all of these, we're like, oh my God, your body is working and it is amazing. Like look at what you get to become. You're a woman. Like, this is so cool. And he did a really good job, but I don't know that he wants to be there when we go pick out the vibrator. You know what I mean, I don't know.
No, and I feel like that's perfectly okay, you know, whatever it is. And I think it just speaks to his level of trust in you, you know, to know what's right for your daughter and show his support. I'm just curious because I was just picturing my husband's face listening to this and going, what now? You're what now?
Right. And there's an age that's appropriate.
Totally.
You know? I mean,
yes. Not like 7 years old.
No. No.
Yeah. You know, and I think the other thing I was thinking is you were talking about, you know, him being the one that was home, right? During that experience, that first experience, you know, there's a lot of conversation now around why do we educate our kids? Why do we have sex ed separate, like the gender separate? Like, why shouldn't the boys know what happens with the girls and the girls know what happens to the boys. Like, you have grown men who are being applauded for buying tampons, but they have no idea what they're buying them for. Like, they don't know the process. They don't know anything. Like, it just seems a little silly when you think of it like that. Like, it's science, it's biology, it's how we procreate. Like, why shouldn't we know what the other one is going through? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me anymore.
There's a lot of ways in which I think education keeps very separate, and the veil, like kids aren't going to figure stuff out, and
Right.
they're not talking to them like mature adults. There's a part of that. But that's the education system, right? There's a lot of that can be done at home. And, my big conversation with my stepsons when we had the sex talk was a lot about respecting his body, what consent means. And then I spent a lot as a woman into how to, making sure you're checking in with your partner. What does it feel like for her? Like, what's going, like, what else is like, this is not just about this getting off sex act or what you see in porn and where our kids learn things from. Like, there's so much more to that experience. And so I think if we educate as parents, our sons and our daughters equally, I think that's a good stop, because they're not going to get it in school. That's for sure.
Right. They're definitely not. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, thank you for going down that rabbit hole with me. Didn't necessarily expect to go down that far, but I'm glad we did. A lot of good stuff out of there. I do want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to say, because I know yoga has been like such a part of your life. You're certified up the wazoo, and it's been so impactful in your life. Is there anything about, my show being about mental health and motherhood that someone who's never taken a yoga class in her life, like what would you say are the benefits? Are, maybe something that people who've not been to a class like wouldn't even know is a possibility of getting into this practice a little bit?
It's interesting because a lot of times the first yoga class is like the opposite of what yoga could be. It's very stressful. You feel judged.
Yes.
You don't know what you're doing.
Uncomfortable.
All the things.
Yeah.
And you walk out of that, you're like, oh, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
But the practice itself is a 5,000-year-old practice. Like, it has been around for a reason. Number one, the way you move your body feels good. We are energy, and there's no other physical movement that I do that moves my body in a way that really opens it up, that feels so much better at the end of the practice. Like, I don't come out from the tennis court and be like, man, my body feels great. I'm usually like, oh, my shin hurts, my hip and my, I mean, I like playing tennis and I have a lot of fun doing it, but the physical part of yoga is that where I'm just in my body. It's just me and my mat. I get to just be there. What I've found is that it's an exploratory practice. It's an internal practice. It's a practice of just awareness, of noticing. So when we talk about where does mindfulness begin, for me, it began in my yoga practice because that's where I started. I started to just feel the physical sensations in my body. I started to just listen to my breath and get lost in my breath and just get lost in the flow and the movement. And for me, that was meditation. That was my taste of stillness, of, even though I was physically doing something, my mind was just there, hyper focused. I was right in the moment of just being in the experience. And so I think that's what people can get from yoga. It's all levels. It's it can be done in a chair. It can be done lying down. It doesn't have to be a vigorous flow. It could be done if you're recovering from injury. You can work just on your breathing if you're postpartum, and that's yoga. There's so many ways it can adapt to benefit the practitioner. And we know it reduces stress. We know it alleviates pain. We know it helps. We know all of these things increases our pulmonary capacity because you're focusing on your breath. We know all of these things scientifically, down regulates the nervous system, which we have lost the ability to do. We do not know as a people, as a culture, how to get out of fight or flight. We just live in this constant state of hypervigilance. And yoga teaches you how to start to down regulate your nervous system, how to work with the breath as our tool to get into the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is the only place where we can actually recover. It is our rest and digest system. And if our body is never getting into rest and digest mode, we're not going to feel very good. And I know that from firsthand because I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are just some of the many, many benefits. I suggest checking out YouTube. I've got classes on YouTube that I offer. I send out on my monthly newsletter on the zenmommy.com. I send out classes every month that are exclusive to the newsletter that are great. I'm super alignment based, so it gives people a good foundation. Get comfortable at home, try some free classes out, get comfortable, and then get the confidence to go into a studio. And if you don't like the particular class or the teacher, know that there's another one out there. Just keep searching, because I think you have to, like going to church. I mean, you have to connect with the place, with the practice, with the teacher. And they're all different forms of yoga and different sects, SECTS of yoga that we've been talking about.
I know the other.
So really it's just, it's not one size fits all. It's, just keep going. I know for a lot of the guys, they like a Bikram or a very structured practice that's the same thing each and every time, because they know what to expect, and it doesn't matter who teaches it, and it's very predictable. But just give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for going into that, because I think a lot of us, I'll speak for myself, at some point yoga became just another way to exercise. And that message was pushed, which it is, don't get me wrong, but that message was pushed by the power yogas, the sculpt yoga, the intense yogas, which actually are my preferred method of yoga. But I was seeing it more as like checking off a box of, this is my exercise, this is my workout. And I say that to say, at the time when I had that mentality, when I would go to a class that wasn't hot, that wasn't power flow, vinyasa, kick your butt, it felt like a quote unquote waste of time. And the way you're talking about it, and I think it's so important to say it that way, is that no one's keeping track. No one's looking. No one cares if your yoga practice is it's for you. I think that's the best way the thing I'm trying to say is that your yoga practice is for you, and it's what you want it to be. And it can be sweaty and hard one day and totally Zen-ish the next day, like, I think you either, I don't know, I'm on a tangent now, but I feel like there are like two schools of thought. It's either this is exercise, or you're like this person who studies all the texts and knows all this, and it's like, it can be what you want it to be. It can be right in the middle. It can be both. It can be whatever, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, yeah. And yoga's always been my mirror for me. So like when I went to a class and I was super annoyed, it was like, what about me? What about me is showing up in this way where I don't like this teacher's voice, or I'm annoyed at this class, or this person's mad is too close to me. So it allowed me to kind of look at the not so great things and some great things. There were some awesome things that came up, like, wow, you really just were uninhibited there and flew up into a handstand and didn't care that you were in the middle of the room and could have knocked 52 people over.
Right.
But it definitely showed me some things about myself that wouldn't necessarily come up or in a way that I would pay attention to. But because I was in a space of stillness, of mental stillness, these things came up, and I got to be, and they say this in yoga, you get to be the observer of yourself, which we don't often get to be. We're the doers. We're constantly going, but you get to sit back and kind of draw in your senses. I mean, I remember doing practices blindfolded just because I totally wanted to be like, let me feel and fumble my way through this and see what that felt like. But it let me look at myself and be like, there's some things, there's some reactions
interesting
that you might need to work on.
Yeah.
Or maybe journal about that later, or talk to a therapist or phone a
Yeah.
friend, or, maybe just notice these things about yourself, because we do so many things by habit and reaction. But that's where the cool part, like, we know yoga can change the brain. We know meditation can change the brain. We know we can change that, because maybe we were, like I was, this very type A, reactionary, intense, kind of mean sometimes person, that I got to soften, and I didn't have, and change, and practice compassion and empathy and stillness. And it was amazing.
Yeah. All right. And lastly, aside from yoga, what are some of your, maybe go-to or most favored ways of taking care of yourself?
Oh, yeah. What do I love to do? Scheduling things in for me is super important.
Me too.
I take that chunk in the morning, whether it's connect with my husband, to do a yoga class, to go for a walk. I mean, after I take the kids to school, I'm like, I could sit at my computer and start working, but those, minutes for me in the morning are super important. And I think a lot of it for me is just checking in and seeing what I need. Most of it at the time is days off. That's what I do for myself. I really, it's very easy as an entrepreneur and as someone who's constantly on and with technology, to be just really connected all the time, and having to send that last email. And I really try to spend time on the weekends, being unplugged and disconnected. I mean, there are times that you have to work, and you do. But that's important for me. I schedule out times in the summer to just get really present with my kids. I like my kids. I like hanging out with them. I like showing, and now, they irritate me and all that. And they're, she's a teenager, and their sisters fight and all that great stuff. But just things that I know bring me joy, of having a day of like, hey, let's go strawberry picking today, and let's just do something silly. And, having those moments, because I know that fills me up, that especially in the summertime, that gets me recharged, and it's a little more laid back. And I think it's just continuing to check in with yourself and see what you really need in that moment. Sometimes it's a bath. Sometimes it's time away from my family. Sometimes it's just a really good meal. Sometimes it's Netflix and DoorDash. All of those things can really nourish you and your soul, if that's what you need.
Unfortunately, I think one of the hardest things is for women, particularly moms, is once we know what we need, it's that permission piece. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. Just do it. Do what you need to do.
It's just a choice, right? I mean, we have choices all day long. And it's just really, if we start to take the story away from it of being like a good mom or a bad mom, or all of the things that we want to tell ourselves about the experience, if it's just a choice, it's like, I'm going to choose me. And the reality is, everybody is okay.
It's just us who live in this state of agony, right?
Right. Your kids are okay. Your husband's okay. I mean, everybody's okay. And the more that you can recognize your needs, take time for yourself, you are leading by example. You are showing your family members, your kids, your spouse, that you matter, that your needs matter, that their needs matter, by taking care of yourself. And you teach them self-care and self-love, right? And that's what it's about.
Boom. All right, Jess, thank you so much. This was great. I will link all of Jess's website and her podcast and all that good stuff, and some of her YouTubes. Oh my goodness, I'm excited to go check out some of your classes on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. This was great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
How much do you love Zen-ish? I totally relate with this idea of being Zen-ish, and it feels very on point with a concept that keeps presenting itself to me. And I find that happens a lot. Once something gets going, or the universe is trying to tell me something, it keeps putting it in front of me. And the concept that it keeps putting in front of me is moving away from this idea that I have to put myself in a box. So for example, I don't have to be the mom that always shows up to pre-K drop-off and pick-up put together. But I don't always have to be the mom that looks like she just rolled out of bed. I can do both. I can show up one way today and another way tomorrow. I most of the time lean on showing up like the mom that just rolled out of bed, and I keep saying I'm going to be the mom that shows up put together, and to think I'm going to do it every day is just not realistic. So I can do both. I can be extroverted and social one day and introverted and want to retreat another. And as I'm saying this, it might not sound all that revolutionary, but in my experience, there are two factors that contributed to this feeling like brand new spanking information to me. And the first is that in becoming a mom, my personality and my identity, I feel like have changed a lot. I've had to let go of some aspects of what used to define me. I used to be defined by professional accomplishments, keeping a clean house, taking a considerable amount of alone time, going out, partying with ease. And, a lot of that's changed and I've had to let it go. And, it's leading me into the second point that culturally we are consistently trying to put moms in boxes. Are you a crunchy mom? Are you a hot mess mom? Are you a fashion mom? Are you an organic mom? A nugget and fries mom? And so on and so on. And over the course of my just short 4.5 years of being a mom, the type of mom that I've identified as has changed. With my first, I was organic everything. No sweets, I was just really strict, no screens, any of that. And, my second comes along and a lot of things change. And I guess ultimately what I'm saying is that I really appreciate and resonate with the idea behind Zen-ish. And, Jess, she practices yoga and mindfulness, but she's also a human. She can lose it on her kids just like the rest of us. And I don't know. I think too, like you think you're going to be a certain type of person, right? I think I'm always going to be this person that has a clean house and all the things I already mentioned. And then I had kids and that all had to change. And then I also thought I was going to be a certain type of mom, and that's changed too. And I guess, again, I don't know, the point I'm really trying to make, and I'm coming around to it, I promise, is that fitting into boxes, trying to fit people into boxes, trying to put ourselves into a box, it's never really served anyone. And yet culturally, it's all we want to do is label people and put them into boxes. It's funny, right? I don't know. I don't have anything solved or worked out about that, but it's just the main point that comes to mind when I think about Jess. She's breaking generational cycles. She's doing things differently with her kids than was done with her. And her platform is doing the same. She's reframing motherhood, and I appreciate that so much. So thank you, Jess, and thank you for listening. That's all I've got. I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.